Hello and welcome to The Closing Track, the official podcast of Another Ascending Lark, where music and the Christian worldview collides, and all of your friends around the camp table are telling you to chug, 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 chug.
What kind of camp are we talking about here?
The camp that, we used to work at.
Well, thinking of a church camp combined with chug, 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 chug doesn't really mix very well.
Man, okay, did I ever tell you the story about the time I, spit up salsa on my youth minister in front of, the whole entire cafeteria?
You did not.
Okay, so this was, my very first, church camp ever, so to speak. And I was in a pretty bad state at the time, whatever. And, I was a pretty messed up teenager at the time. And I, for whatever reason, bragged in front of my youth minister that I could drink chunky salsa. Just chug chunky salsa. And
What?
well, does it surprise you that I would do that?
Yes.
What? With all the salsa that I eat, that surprises you?
There's a difference between eating salsa a lot and chugging salsa. I mean, I wouldn't chug wasabi.
That's just gross. That's just disgusting. Ugh. The idea of chugging wasabi is throwing me off game right now. But anyway, and no, so I go to the serving line and I get a cup full of chunky salsa. It wasn't very hot, so that was part of the reason why I said I could do it, was because it really wasn't all that hot. I mean, it was more picante breakfast salsa-y than it was hot. And so I go up to my youth minister and I just start drinking it. And something catches in my windpipe, and the next thing I know, the salsa that I had just consumed was all over my youth minister. And everybody stood up and applauded me.
Huh. That sounds kind of similar to the time I almost killed someone this past summer.
What?
Okay, I'll avoid using names, but this event scarred me for life. We were around talking about various things, me and some other staffers, and one staffer had finished eating ice cream and was drinking water. I said something that made her laugh really hard. She choked on her water.
Yeah. Okay. I was there for this.
Yeah. She choked on her water and then, wound up coughing it all up. Ha ha, that's gross. We all laugh. Then she turned pale and started going, and we all started freaking out, wanting to do the Heimlich maneuver. She said no and then threw up all over the floor multiple times.
That was pretty sad.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm scarred for life now, and I don't think I'll ever try to make anyone laugh again.
That would be disappointing then, because the world needs the laughter generated by Brett Strobel.
Okay, maybe I will consider.
It would be like Tigger, who can't bounce.
Wow, that is pretty deep.
Well, that's only because, in the original Winnie the Pooh, there was an episode where Rabbit basically, commands Tigger to, never ever bounce again. And it's actually quite sad. But how did we get here?
I don't know.
My name is Austin. I am the head honcho for Another Ascending Lark. I'm the guy who has to wrestle with a MacBook and all these other things to explain why technical issues and audio issues just happen for no explicit reason whatsoever, but I guess that's life.
And I'm Brett, the other guy involved with Another Ascending Lark, who knows nothing about what was going on and has had to sit here while Austin silently whispered curses to himself.
Yeah, it was. I don't understand it. I still don't understand it. If the show sounds weird, look, I did everything I could. I don't know why the audio sounded so messed up, and it took us 45 minutes beyond when we were supposed to record to get the ball rolling. But, oh well. We got a great show for you planned, though, regardless of the audio issues, if you can bear to put up with them. We're going to be talking more about movies today than we are music. We're going to talk about music for a little bit in the getting, but we're going to be talking about the new movie Believe Me, which Brett and I watched last night, and we have a lot to talk about, a lot to say about it. So think we're going to be looking forward to that. If you want to contact us, though, you can get a hold of us on Facebook at Another Ascending Lark. At Twitter, our handle is AALblog. And, of course, you can visit the website at anotherascendinglark.com, where we post the shows for you to listen to within the website. And we also have links to the articles that we may mention in a show, like some of the other episodes recently where we had a lot of news topics. If you want to go read those sources, go to anotherascendinglark.com, find the episode, and you can get those links to those shows. Don't have much in the way of news, only because it's a huge news event, landmark huge.
Yeah, this is really big.
And I fully admit that I don't understand it all that well. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to read a little bit, going to break it down, and we'll see just how long it takes. So over the last week, a massive legal decision came down on Sirius XM, mainly Sirius XM, but it also affects Pandora and the legal landscape, which this could impact. It's hard to really understate. Like when we talk about copyright law down the road, for the future or whatever, this will be a major landmark moment. California federal judges delivered a legal earthquake in the music industry by declaring Flo and Eddie of the Turtles the victors in a lawsuit against Sirius XM over the public performance of pre-1972 sound recordings. That's a quote from the Billboard article, which you could find at Another Ascending Lark, and you can check out the last episode or the last edition of the Weekend Post, the Weekend Playlist. I mean, the Weekend Playlist is basically just like your end of the week reading list for music related stuff. If you're looking for something to read with your morning coffee about music-y stuff, and it's not, gossipy stuff like, oh my gosh, Kanye West said something stupid as Jesus again. We don't do stuff like that.
Yeah, and besides, something like Kanye West saying something stupid isn't really news.
Yeah, it's really not all that much of a news. But anyway, so we're not going to break this down only because I don't really understand it. All I know is that this decision happened, and the implications for this decision are gigantic. Yet, I mean, I'll have to understand the ins and out of it in order to be able to say that this is a gigantic, far-reaching decision. So go online to Another Ascending Lark. You can read that article, or you can go onto Billboard and you can find several more articles that deal with the subject, or just, a simple Google search might help. But if copyright law, the music industry, the status of Pandora, and Sirius XM are of any interest to you, you should check it out. That's really the only news thing that I have this week, just because it was a really kind of a slow news week for the second week in a row. Nothing too major to report, I suppose. Brett, let's talk about some albums. So I know you're not happy with me for covering this one.
Very, very not happy.
I mean, yeah, it had to happen at some point.
No, it didn't.
Yeah, it did. Like, how could we not talk about this?
Well, we can talk about it, but not in the light that you're about to talk about it.
Okay, so I had said in a couple episodes prior how we would take an album that came out earlier in the year and revisit it, since we were on hiatus for 9 months. And as many as the listeners who personally know me know, I am not a fan of Casting Crowns. Not a fan at all. But since they had a new studio album come out, I figured I would do due diligence and review it, because I liked their acoustic album that came out back in early 2013. It was good.
For shame.
It was good.
You said it was okay before. You didn't say it was good.
I gave it a 7, which is pretty much in the okay range. Okay, goodish range.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, so it's either way. It was okay. It was good. Just to get this out of the way, this album wasn't good. This album is more of the same that they have done all this time. There are moments where they do stretch themselves, but it's not quite to the extent that it should have been, given the stretching that they did for their acoustic sessions album. The album opens up with a really bad Mumford & Sons East song called Thrive, and then it goes through the hit radio single All You Ever Wanted, which, I mean, it's cut and paste Casting Crowns. There's nothing about it that's anything really new about it. The first song on the album that actually shows any promise is Broken Together, which I will admit was a pretty interesting release, because sonically it's definitely a little bit more experimental for them. Lyrically, it's far more authentic and genuine than some of the other stuff that they put out on this album. It's one of the better songs on the album. It follows with probably 3 of the most mediocre songs they've ever done. Love You With the Truth, which is literally the chorus is, I'm going to love you with the truth. And it's like, really? You couldn't find any other way to express that? This Is Now and Dream for You, which I don't even know where to begin on that one. And then, out of nowhere, Follow Me, which is the song where the female vocalist, whose name escapes me, takes charge. And at first I thought I was listening to like a Civil Wars cover or something to that nature, because I had to look at my phone to make sure. Am I still listening to Casting Crowns at this point? Because this doesn't sound like Casting Crowns. It sounds good.
Well, Civil Wars I wouldn't really call good either, but
Barton Hollow era Civil Wars.
Okay, there we go.
Anyway, and then you get to Heroes, which I don't even need to begin on that one. Waiting on the night to fall. The closing track. You should listen to that at least once.
I'll consider it. The only song off this album I've heard was Thrive, just because it's played on the radio a lot, and from what I gathered from it, it sounds very Joel Osteen-ish.
Yeah, I don't know if it would say it was Joel Osteen-ish, but no. If you are a Casting Crowns fan, you're still going to be a Casting Crowns fan by the time this album is over. If you're like me and have some legitimate problems with Casting Crowns, then this album isn't going to change your mind. Although the thing about this album that I like, there is one thing about this album that I like, and I get the glare that you're giving me right now, but this will make you'll like this, what I have to say. Broken Together, Follow Me, and Waiting on the Night to Fall are so vastly different from the rest of the material. It contrasts how plastic, how not genuine, how very safe the rest of the stuff is, because you listen to those three songs in particular, and there is something present in those songs that isn't present anywhere else. Those three songs show that these guys can be good. Like, I've always believed that these guys can be good. The only problem is that they are content to ride the same things that they've been doing really since the beginning of the career, and they've really been shortchanging themselves because, as these songs show and as the acoustic album showed, they have the ability to pull off something that is really unique, and they just don't do it. Does that satisfy you?
Somewhat.
Okay, I'm glad it's somewhat satisfied you. You're probably more of a Casting Crowns critic than I am, but okay, let's go. How about you talk a little bit about Stryper's new album?
All right, Stryper's new album, Live at the Whiskey. Well, first off, that's an awesome name.
Yeah, because it was
anyway.
it was at the Whiskey Go Go.
Well, yeah, but just whiskey, yay. And yeah, it's what you expect. It's a live album with a lot of their songs. I mean, some of them new, some of them classics.
Most of them classics.
Yeah, most of them classics. But the one thing that just made me scratch my head and think, what is the second song on this album, was Marching into Battle, which is quite possibly one of the worst songs I've ever heard in my life.
It's not so much, I don't think the song in of itself is unsalvageable, but especially that recording of it. The first time I heard it, I was like, yeah, I'm not ever going to listen to that song again.
Yeah, I mean, like, the verses, to an extent, they have their good moments, they have their okay moments, but when the chorus is nothing but marching into battle with, like, just saying that over and over again, with a very boring tempo, with a very boring beat, with a very boring notes in it, I'm just like,
the harmony in particular on this live album it just sounds terrible on this live album.
yeah.
But no, I liked it, even though it's got some pretty big problems with it.
Yeah.
I mean,
And one other thing that stuck out to me, I mean, there's really nothing you can do about it in a live album, was Loud and Clear, which I like it because the non-live version of it, because it has the echo in it during the chorus, but can't really do that in a live recording. So, I mean, yeah, I understand they can't really do anything about that, but I still like it better the other way around. And they have their cover of Jesus Is Just All Right, which
was awesome.
Yeah.
Was great.
Was really good. Probably my favorite one from this album was To Hell with the Devil, which is a great song to begin with anyway.
See, I thought Soldiers Under Command was my favorite.
Yeah, Soldiers Under Command is a pretty good one too.
But the biggest problem that I had with this, and this is a real foundational problem, is that the mixing of this album is terrible. I mean, I don't know how it is on the DVD. That might be a little bit better on the DVD because it's a CD-DVD combo. We didn't have access to the DVD. We're just reviewing the album portion of it. But the drums are unbelievably high in the mix. Songs like You Know What to Do and More Than a Man particularly really show the hi-hats and the cymbals are unbelievably loud and drown everything else out. But, even though it's got a couple of weak moments for a live album, especially for a band like Stryper, it's still a solid release. The band themselves are super tight. I mean, you listen to the songs, even with the mixing errors, these guys are professionals through and through.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really hate this album. I mean, there wasn't really enough in it for me to say that, but I didn't really like it that much. I mean, it didn't really impress me too much. It was basically what I would expect from a live Stryper album.
Yeah, I mean, it's never minding the lyrics, the lyrical content, because I mean, let's be honest, Stryper's lyrics have some pretty bad theology in them.
And a saying like "the rock that makes me roll" is just
Stryper is one of the few bands of the 80s where, you know, evangelicals and music were having this really weird relationship where you couldn't write them off entirely because Oz Fox and Michael Sweet at the time and still today can play circles around most guitarists alive at the moment.
fair enough.
Their
And it also
lyric
gave them an excuse to pelt people with Bibles.
that's the awkward and cheesy part of it. I mean, let's be honest, Stryper's a cheesy band. I mean,
Well, they're a glam metal band if you get right down to it.
yeah, I guess that makes them, you know, automatically cheesy. But when you have Christian, like overtly Christian and bad Christian lyrics for a glam metal band, I mean, the cheese factor is strong with this one.
Indeed, very strong.
Even though that, as far as music goes, they are so good musically. I can't stand their lyrics. I love their music. And I would love to see them live, honestly. Even though I'd be face palming, you know, most of their stuff is just so bad lyrically, but I would go see them to play guitar.
Yeah, definitely me too. And I mean, it'd be a pretty cool story to catch a Bible that Stryper threw me.
I knew someone who caught a Bible that Stryper threw at them. Like, I don't remember where they saw it, but they caught one of the Bibles and said that it was neat, and I think they might still have it, but I mean, it wasn't. I don't believe that he like got saved from having the Bible thrown at him or catching the Bible or whatever. I wonder how many people actually got saved from that.
Probably quite a bit. I mean, it's a similar concept to the Gideons if you think about it.
What?
The Gideons, you know, they plant Bibles everywhere they can go. Stryper, they throw Bibles everywhere they can go. It's very much, to me at least, follows the parable of the sower, just sowing the word wherever you can and letting it grow where it will.
One of them is placing Bibles in the drawers of hotel rooms. One of them is hurling them off the stage at the heads of people in attendance.
Okay, the Gideons don't just put them in hotel rooms. They do other stuff. I've seen them pass them out
Do
at
they
colleges.
hurl the Bibles at people though?
Okay, when you're in a metal concert, there is a different sort of thing going on there. I mean, passing them out at a metal concert wouldn't really have as good of an effect as the Gideons passing out a Bible would. The Gideons probably couldn't also pelt college students with Bibles at the same time. I mean, you know, right technique for right situation.
I don't know. I don't necessarily have ever condoned Stryper's Bible throwing history. They don't do it anymore, thank goodness. But no, if you like Stryper, you probably have already listened to the live album. The last album we're going to talk about before we get on to a little bit of a movie chat is Joe Bonamassa's Different Shades of Blue, which I got to see Mr. Bonamassa live back in April.
And he didn't bother to tell me about it until like 5 days before he went.
No, I talked about it for months. You couldn't have afforded the ticket.
True, but you might have talked about it for months, but not to me.
I put it on Facebook.
I don't read your Facebook.
Well, gee, thanks.
No problem. I mean, I live with you. Why would I need to check up everything on Facebook for you?
I don't know. But no, Mr. Bonamassa came in April to Amarillo, which nobody comes to Amarillo. So the fact that someone like Joe Bonamassa came to Amarillo was like, please, can we have some more musicians come to Amarillo? Please, we're starving for good artists.
Well, Seether did come once.
Well, yeah, but how many? When it comes to Texas, like the main tour stops are Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, Houston.
And Lubbock to an extent.
Lubbock, yeah, but I don't know. I've only been to one concert in Lubbock, and it was not a good show. But anyway, and his show was fantastic. I paid $80 for a ticket, and I was like second to back row. I could barely see him, but he played an acoustic set and he played an electric set. And the total time for the show, I think the show started about 7 o'clock and ran till like 10:30. So I mean, it was a pretty lengthy show.
So you did get your money's worth.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I got my money's worth. When he was playing his acoustic set, he had a throne of guitars surrounding him, of acoustic guitars. And I think there were like 7 or 8 guitars, and he would pick up a new acoustic for each of the songs in his acoustic set, which...
Dang.
Yeah, and then he picked up one guitar, and realized that it was the wrong guitar and put it back, and then immediately made a Star Wars reference.
What Star Wars reference was that?
These aren't the droids you're looking for. And
Excellent.
yes, and it was so natural, it was so smooth. I mean, not that I didn't like him, dislike him or anything, but I liked him even more. And so I was definitely pleasantly enjoyed with his live show. It was definitely something I am happy to have gone and seen. But
And didn't he yell "shut up" at one of the audience
oh
members?
yes, he was in towards the end of his electric set. He was getting pretty dang technical and just thumbing his way through. I don't even know exactly what he was doing because I couldn't see him. There weren't cameras or anything on him. Like I really couldn't make him out. But it's very soft, very light, very delicate. I mean, you could hear everything in the auditorium because of how soft he was playing. And people were drinking and people were getting drunk on crappy beer. And it was
For shame.
yeah, I know, right? I mean, getting drunk on crappy beer at a Joe Bonamassa show. What a disappointment. But anyway, and there was this one guy who had a little bit too much to drink who just kept shouting, and Joe finally got a little ticked off at it and just yelled, "Shut up!" as he's playing, and everybody cheered. So I don't know if it necessarily worked because it went from one guy yelling and shouting to a bunch of people cheering and clapping, but
But still, I'm pretty sure it died down after the cheering, though, didn't it?
yeah, it was great. But that all that to say is that he didn't play any of this new material on his show, which I was a little disappointed with because this album is entirely original material from Joe. It's not back to his usual, his stuff before where he has been covering and sort of updating some of the greater blues hits from of old. These is entirely Joe Bonamassa's stuff from beginning to end. He collaborated with a couple different writers, but these aren't covers. These are original songs, and he's willing to experiment quite a bit on this album. The opening track, "Hey Baby, New Rising Sun," is not what you would expect for a Joe Bonamassa album, and then it leads to "Oh Beautiful," which I mean, is the song structure for this is so unusual for him that it kind of sets you, on nerves at first. You're like, okay, this is really weird for Joe. It's awesome. Like his guitar work is as sharp and as great as ever, but it's such an innovative stance for him to take. And then you get into loving a love song, and it starts to feel a little bit more familiar. And then you start hearing the horns that are all throughout the album, a la Chicago and some other bands that have classic rock horns in it. And that's throughout the whole entire album, which I love and I think works extremely, extremely well for him. And if he can pull that off live, oh my gosh, that would be incredible if he could get the horns that are all, the brass that's all throughout this album on whatever live show he does. He does have, a couple of slower songs. "Never Give All Your Heart," "Different Shades of Blue." The title track is a little bit of a slower song, but it's in the spirit of the blues lyrically. I mean, it's definitely about heartache and heartbreak and romance because that's the blues. I mean, romance
Yeah.
is like the source of all things blues related, or most of them anyway. And the only song on the album that really throws you the curveball is the closing track, "So What Would I Do," which feels like it should be in a jazz lounge. I mean, it's very slow. It's a song that you would want to get up with your significant other, which neither of us have, and have a dance with a glass of wine under moonlight. And
Yeah, chances of either of us having something like that happen is very slim.
I know, but one can hope, or and at least that's what the images that come up into your mind are. So if you're not a Joe Bonamassa fan, this is the time to jump in. If you are a Joe Bonamassa fan and you haven't got a hold of this, you're really missing out. This is definitely a real leap for him. Not that he's ever been a bad musician. His stuff has always been outstanding, but he really breaks several new barriers, even for himself, in this album. And I hope that he continues to write his own material and collaborate on his own material, because I enjoyed this album probably more than some of his earlier stuff, where it's him speaking the languages of people that have come before him. And this one, even though he's written stuff with other artists, it's Joe Bonamassa mainly speaking and in his musical perspective coming through. And it's very different. But personally, I couldn't get enough of this album. I mean, I've listened to it so much this week. This is an outstanding album. Even if you're not a blues fan, if you're a classic rock fan or just a straight modern rock fan, you need to get this album. This is definitely an album for 2014 that will definitely be a standout for the whole entire year. And I personally cannot recommend it enough. I loved it, and I will continue to love it. As for next week's releases, Brett, what do we got coming out next week?
Next week we have Desperation Band's Banner, Hillsong Worship will be releasing No Other Name.
Another worship album from Hillsong? No way.
Yeah, wow, that's a real big shocker. And John Mark McMillan will be releasing the Border Sessions.
The Border, yeah, which just from looking at the title track of it, I don't know much about it, but it looks like it'll be the Borderlands with song commentary for each song. I think that's all I know about it.
Interesting. And then Lady Antebellum's 747.
I'm not a country guy, but I've always had a soft spot in my heart for Lady Antebellum. I don't know. There's just something about the chemistry of that band that even though I'm not a country guy, I've always been attracted to. Even some of their radio stuff, I find myself really enjoying. So, there's also a double album from Prince coming out this week.
Really?
I forgot to put that in the list only because I was trying to get research information on it and I had a hard time doing it. But apparently Prince is releasing 2 albums simultaneously on Tuesday.
Weird.
Yeah, I don't know much about Prince. Weird. No way.
Yeah, no way.
No way.
The artist formerly known as the artist formerly known as Prince.
Something like that.
Yeah.
That's really all that's it as far as music is concerned. So this episode has had more problems than it's like making me want to pull my hair out. It's not going to show up necessarily unless you got a super trained ear, but we've had to restart this episode and patch it up so far, 3 times?
Yeah, I think 3 times.
I mean, my gosh, it's like last week's episode was flawless and went so smoothly. It took me no time at all whatsoever to edit it. And then this episode, we start 45 minutes late than what I needed to start so I could make sure I could get it done in time and study for my test. And then just random stuff happens. It doesn't make any sense. And it's just, this is fun and I enjoy it. But when things like this happen, it's just like, why do I do this to myself?
Gotta love technology.
Yeah. Something like that. Let's get on to the main course. Even we got plenty of time. Let's get on to the main course. We're going to be talking about the movie Believe Me, which came out this past Friday. So it is a relatively recent film. I don't know where it is on the iTunes independent charts, but I know over the weekend it was at number 8 at one point. I don't know if it's gone up or down since then on the independent chart. But yeah, we're going to talk about this movie and break it down just because there's a lot to come with it. So, but beforehand, we want to just cover a couple of preliminary things. First of all, we are in a sense reviewing the movie, so spoiler alerts probably going to happen.
Most likely. I don't think I can talk about this movie without saying any spoilers at all.
We're going to try to be general and vague on certain points unless it's specifically required to like quote a scene or specifically describes what actually happens, but we're not if you're listening to this and if you haven't seen the movie but you want to finish listening to the episode, we're not going to try to spoil. The less we can spoil for you, the better. That's what we're going to try to go for. But there probably will be spoilers at some point. So, Brett, what is this movie about?
This movie is about a college student who is about to graduate and he's going to go on to law school, but his scholarship expires, so he can't afford to pay for college. Very standard story. We hear something like that happening in real life all the time, and he doesn't have enough time to get loans. He doesn't want to take a semester off to make money because that would throw his momentum off, and so he's in a real bind here. And one day he goes to church because a friend of his invited him there. I think it was to check out some chick mainly, but while he was there, this other girl stands up in front of everyone and says that she and a few other people have been called to go on a mission trip to Hawaii, which of course gets chuckles out of the 2 main characters that are there. And she uses one of the standard hyperboles of a lot of people who raise money for a mission trip, saying this mission trip will be impossible without this church's funding. And afterwards, he goes up to her and asks, so how much do you have left to raise? And she said, well, about $4,000, and we started a week ago. And he's like, you raised $16,000 in 1 week. And I just have to make a side note. In this scene, there's a guy in the background with what is quite possibly the worst scarf I have ever seen in my life. I mean, it is just bad. But
From there, what idea does he get?
from there, he's like, hey, I can raise money under the guise of it being for a mission trip, it being to save people of Africa by giving them clean water. And instead, he'll take all the money for college.
Yeah, it's a provocative premise. It's not a very comfortable premise. Even for me, I found the premise to be a little bit troubling, only
And
because of how possible this is.
yeah, and if I didn't know that like Lecrae was in it and that was made by a Christian studio, I would have probably just straight up been offended by it and not wanted to watch it at all. But knowing that Lecrae's in it, that Christians made this movie, maybe like, hey, there's got to be something else to this then.
Now, it's interesting because this is made by a Christian studio, but is this a Christian movie?
Yes and no. It does have, I mean, some of the standard tropes of Christian movies. The Christian worldview is definitely shown throughout it, but there's no true gospel presentation. There's no true coming to Jesus moment. There's cussing all throughout the movie. Nothing too bad, but still there's cussing all throughout the movie, and it shows drinking and partying and all sorts of other stuff. Yeah, which you don't see in Christian movies.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the negative that this isn't a Christian movie only because, well, film is a relatively recent development as far as the arts go. I mean, the very first public exhibition of a motion picture in America was on the 23rd of April back in 1896. We really didn't have film with audio until the 1930s, and then World War II kind of put a stop on that. So what do you compare it to, like sculpting and painting or literature or even music? Film is as a relatively young and new medium, and we're far behind as Christians when it comes to music. But when it comes to movies, it's like really within the past 4 or 5 years that we're just now really starting to get our feet wet in this medium. And so when it comes to what is a Christian movie, there hasn't been much put out to really define the genre well. And so this, given the handful of movies that have come out, which immediately come to my mind are like Fireproof and Courageous and what's that one movie, the football movie that we both hate?
Facing the Giants.
Yeah, that was one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
If you pray to God, then your football team will win. Yay.
Yeah, that movie was terrible. Relative to the handful of movies that have come out so far, Believe Me doesn't fit that. Believe Me either doesn't belong in that category and is not a Christian film, or it is a Christian movie and it transcends the genre. But I'm going to go with that. It's not a Christian movie only because the genre as a whole is so young that it's, I guess, premature to go ahead and start really trying to pin obvious examples like God's Not Dead. Okay, calling those Christian movies is, that's not too hard of a stretch to make. But a movie like Believe Me is not something that's easy to do. Unlike music, because we both don't think that Christian music can exist. Christian movies can exist.
Because movies, by definition, have to have some sort of proposition.
Yeah.
Even like a Three Stooges movie has propositions in it.
Yeah, music. You can listen to the last episode where we talk about this more, but movies and film, there are visual messages being communicated. I mean, even back in the days of Charlie Chaplin and, the silent film era, they were telling you something. And those propositions can be rooted in the Christian worldview or not. So, unlike Christian music, which doesn't exist and is a category error, Christian movies can exist just as Christian literature can exist because there is something that's being communicated that can be linked to the Christian worldview. But what is this movie telling us?
First off, thing that comes to mind is that unlike a lot of other Christian movies that I've seen or read reviews about, Christians aren't presented as these incredibly pious, incredibly holy, nearly perfect human beings that have one hookup that is eventually solved by the end of the movie. Instead, everyone in this movie has some sort of fatal flaw. Everyone in this movie is a jerk.
Is that? I guess that ties into the overall arching plot of the movie, but this movie as a satire, which I mean, as a satire, is going to poke fun at quite a bit of number of things.
Yes,
Oh,
quite a bit.
oh my,
And
it does the satire thing so well. Which let's just dive in on into the critic. The outline is basically out the window at this point.
yeah.
Let's talk about briefly what we liked about it that was good. First and foremost, this is a good movie. I mean, you would agree that this is a good movie?
Oh yeah, for sure.
We don't feel compelled to make excuses for this movie and try to give it like faith extra credit, so to speak, in some way, shape, or form to justify this movie. Like, I would stick my name to this and say this is a good movie as a movie, not because it's got has to deal with Christians or for whatever religious reason. I mean, you look at some of these other Christian films that have come out in the past couple of years, and they have to put this like faith-based curve, so to speak. You don't have to do that with this movie.
I mean,
this is a good movie.
with this movie, you could easily take out the missions aspect and just say that they're taking money from charities and have no Christian worldview put in it at all, and I would still think it's a good movie.
Yeah, and it's funny. Like, this is a legitimately funny movie. It's part comedy, part dramedy, part drama. But
So it's a dramedy.
yeah, it's a dramedy. I should just say it's a dramedy. It just makes things easier that way, I guess. So as a dramedy, the funny moments for the most part are pretty dang funny.
Especially in the beginning, there's a scene with Nick Offerman.
That scene steals that scene. I mean, we started watching it yesterday, and something happened, and we had to re-download the movie. And I had plans that afternoon, and so did Brett. So we came back later in the evening, and we're going to watch it again. And we're just like, let's just start over from the beginning, just because we want to see that Nick Offerman scene again.
I mean, I won't spoil too much just because it's so hilarious. You need to watch it and get everything for yourself from the beginning. But basically, Nick Offerman is the advisor that breaks the bad news to Sam, who is the main character. He breaks the bad news that his scholarship has expired, which that alone isn't funny, but the whole ensuing conversation and awkwardness that happens in it is just perfect.
Everything about that scene, just him being in the room, is priceless. I mean, that's the only scene that Nick Offerman is in, but it's priceless. It is outstanding. So it's a good movie. It's funny. It is satirical, and for the most part, it's satire done pretty dang well. Which, for Christians, the potential for satire is super, super ripe.
Yeah.
So what other parts about this movie that we thought were good? Like, before we get into some of the more critical aspects of the film, what else in the movie did you like about it?
Well, for sure, the one thing that definitely sticks out in my mind is the scene that Lecrae is in.
This movie made some really good use of cameos, like Nick Offerman's short scene and then Lecrae's scene. I mean, for Lecrae's acting debut, I can't think of a better way for him to debut.
Like, basically what happens, it's a very serious moment in the movie. It's one of the standard parts near the second half of the movie where things get really low, the conflict deepens, and a lot of stuff is just going bad for a lot of people. And Callie, the main lady in this movie, goes to see a Christian movie called Saving Grace.
It's awesome.
Which, from what I can gather, Saving Grace is a Christian movie about a guy whose daughter named Grace is in a coma, and Lecrae plays the clearly Christian doctor talking to Grace's dad.
And it's at a moment where you wouldn't expect something so funny to hop around the corner, but man, when it does, it is. I was like, my gut was hurting. I was laughing so hard.
I have to say the first line that he says.
Of course you do.
He's looking Grace's dad in the eye and says, "Her brain's in a coma, not her heart."
The satire even extends to like a movie within the movie, and even satires. It brings in even more satire into the foray, where the whole movie as a whole isn't necessarily a satire on Christian films. But the scene with Lecrae is a satire on Christian films.
For sure. And the thing that I couldn't help but think, if this scene was placed anywhere else just on its own, a lot of people would probably watch it and think it's just a scene from a Christian movie. But put in the setting it's put in, it's very obvious that it's being satirical, and it's so close to being the real thing that it is incredibly believable for this to be an actual movie.
Yeah, that was yeah. It felt like you were watching a clip from a movie that you could have very well have rented from Netflix or something. It's so well done that it takes on a life of its own, and you have to really ask yourself, well, wait, this isn't an actual movie? Oh, okay. Thank goodness it's not an actual
Yeah,
movie.
thank goodness.
I also liked the fact that there's a good cast for this movie. They didn't try to go the route of Christian films prior to this point and get people who don't really know how to act. And I'm not saying that of every single actor in prior Christian films, but the emphasis for this movie seems to be, can these people act? Like, regardless if they're believers or otherwise, because I don't know if some of the actors in this movie are Christian or not.
In fact, I'm pretty sure Nick Offerman isn't.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Nick Offerman is not a believer, and yet he is in this. He's in this film, and they were real intentional about getting people who could act. And so, even though some of the character development was a little bit off, the cast is solid. There's not a single performance in this movie that is poor. The guy who plays Sam, Alex Russell, brilliant, very convincing, very believable. Outstanding performance at putting on a face, and then when his world comes crashing down, letting that reflect him. Zachary Knighton plays this worship leader who's a jerk and who is somewhat a villain, but not really a villain.
And just another bit of satire I have to point out, just real quick. In the movie, the first worship session you see with Gabriel leading, you hear him singing Jesus a few times, and then you see the screen that shows the lyrics, and it says Jesus, 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 Jesus times 16.
It's yeah. We'll get into more like it's some of the best satire moments down the road. What's his name? Oh yeah, Christopher McDonald. Shooter McGavin is playing the really naive. Is that the word you'd use for Ken? Naive?
I don't know, not necessarily. Maybe at the beginning I would have called him naive, but I'll avoid saying exactly what happens during the movie. But when all the crap goes down and he makes his decision for the continuation of the God Squad, as these 4 people are called, that sounds more maniacal than naive, I'd say.
Okay, I can go with maniacal. But no, the cast is excellent. The soundtrack is excellent. Very very good use of music. The cinematography isn't going to break anything new per se, but the cinematography is done well. So the acting is solid, which I think was probably the thing that really helped sell this movie, at least to me, and really helps it set itself apart, is that you look at Christian films prior and the acting just sucks. I mean, I'm sorry, the acting for most of the films that are the Christian films that have come out as of late they're just not good acting. This film has genuinely believable and good acting. But that's not to say that the movie is perfect. It's not perfect by any stretch, even though I would say it's a good movie. The script in a couple places felt a little weak. There were some moments where I thought the script was a little too subservient to the satire part, and so was a little bit more emphasis on the satire and less emphasis on being a good moment for the script. I mean, at least I thought that. I don't know if that's what you thought, but there were a couple of moments where I thought the script could have been strengthened a little bit, and the self-consciousness of the satire turned down.
Maybe a little bit. I don't think I saw it as much as you did, but one thing I think we both definitely agree on is that the character, Callie, the leading lady, was not very well fleshed out.
Yeah, her performance. Now, Joanna Brady, plays the tour manager that Sam, the main character, has the hots for or whatever, and is in competition with the jerk worship leader. And her performance, her acting is good. Her character development, she's probably the one character in the movie that is pretty much a caricature. Naive, sucker for the cute guy who's also got a passion for missions with massive air quotes in my
massive
head.
Air quotes.
Massive air quotes. It's not that her character isn't underdeveloped, but I wish there had been a little bit more on her end, because it's really not until the end of the movie, when the drama element comes out, that you actually start to see her really shine. And I wish she had more moments in the beginning of the movie where she shined and was a little bit more fleshed out. And you could also say the same a little bit for Gabriel, but Gabriel had a little bit more of a fleshing out. And was a little bit more developed than Callie was.
Yeah, towards the end, I actually started liking Gabriel.
I didn't. The dude's a no. I
But when he had his big talk with Sam about stuff, I mean, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm liking this dude in that scene mainly.
Okay, that scene maybe, but no, Gabriel's a jerk, like through and through. I think Gabriel is a jerk. The only other real thing about this movie that I didn't necessarily like as a comedy and a drama, it tries to blend both, and for the most part, I would say it does it pretty well. But when you get to the end of the movie and it starts falling apart, it shifts a little bit too much to the drama and kind of gets a little bit in too deep into the reflective, contemplative drama part, that it clashes a little bit too strongly with some of the lighthearted satire comedy that dominates the film up to that point.
Well, I mean, it really wasn't a problem for me. I mean, I like shows like Scrubs and How I Met Your Mother that do that quite often. Like Scrubs, you'll see an episode that'll make you laugh your head off for half of it, and then the other half you're wanting to cry. Same thing with How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah, but there's not a decisive genre shift in those moments, though. I don't, at least I haven't seen much of How I Met Your Mother, so maybe there is, and I just don't know. But this movie, even though it's not, flawless, it does have some weaknesses in it. It's a very unique offering altogether. I mean, the premise, notwithstanding, is brilliant. The acting is solid for the most part. The way this movie ends and the climax of this movie, you do not see it coming, even though you can kind of see it coming.
Again, this is definitely something that I definitely will avoid spoiling, but I for sure didn't see it coming. Like, I thought there'd be a much different ending than how it did end.
The ending is perfect.
Yeah.
I couldn't be any more happy with the way the movie ends.
Yeah, I would agree that it was a perfect ending, and having it end in a way that I didn't expect it to is definitely good. And my gosh, I really want to discuss the ending right now, but I'm not going to do that.
Bite your
listeners.
tongue. Bite your tongue. Bite your tongue.
Don't worry, I'm not going to
Drink beer. Bite your tongue.
I'm out of beer.
That's a problem.
But don't worry, I definitely do respect the spoiler rule, and even though we have a spoiler warning here, I'm not going to spoil the ending for y'all.
You're such a compassionate co-host, Brett.
Yes, I am.
But no, this movie really broadens the horizons for what can be considered when it comes to Christians making movies. Because up until this point, we have had relatively safe films as far as the plot is concerned. The plot for this movie is very daring, and it's not something that you would really expect a Christian studio to want to do. I mean, you would have first have expected that this was a non-Christian studio, attempting to, mock Christians or whatever, but this is a Christian Christian studio making a movie on how a group of guys totally con and scam the Christian community, which for a Christian filmmaker, that broadens the horizons and the possibilities quite a bit.
Yeah, and what was actually kind of scary about this movie is that everything that happened, I can honestly see this happening in real life. I could see every bit of this being true.
Yeah, there were some moments where I thought the satire was a little bit too much on the satire, and so it kind of made it less believable. I mean, the opening scenes were like they're showing off their presentation, whatever, and they've got the photoshopped African baby in the diaper, like photoshopped onto an image with a rhino.
No, it was a lion.
Oh, yeah, a lion, my bad.
And then there's one of it riding a lion and one of the baby sinking in quicksand.
Yeah, I mean, stuff like that, I was like, okay, no Christian would fall for that. No Christian would, like, that I thought was the satire, maybe showing itself a little too much. But as an overall, that's what's so scary about this movie, is that this is possible. There are moments in this film where, and I'm sure there were moments for you too, Brett, where you're like, we've seen this firsthand.
Yeah, like one thing in particular that I really like, I believe the character's name is Todd, the really big one who came up with the clothing line cross-dressing.
I didn't include that in the notes, my bad.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure his name was Todd. If it's not, it's similar to that, and we can correct it on the next show. But one thing I really liked is, like, in this one scene, he's been gone overnight. People say, oh, he's probably at a party. And he comes back, and Sam asks, hey, how was a party last night? And he's like, I'm going to be honest. He's saying it wasn't that great. Like, really, why not? And he goes, last night I had 19 beers. He's like, and normally I'm like, yeah, that's badass. But now it's like, who's the old guy with a drinking problem? And I mean, he has this legitimate, heartfelt moment, which could lead to the standard coming to Christ, but it's cut short. And there are a few other moments I can't really think of any off the top of my head, where something like that happens, where it's very close to a coming to Christ moment, but it cuts short, which I think is very unique because you don't see that in Christian movies. In Christian movies, it's the perfect, full on, everything fits perfectly together, everything flows, nothing's interrupted, and they come to Christ. In this, it's a lot more realistic because all the drama of what's going on is interfering with their personal thoughts and things like that. So it's not a perfectly seamless coming to Christ that happens.
Yeah, and the characters themselves are far more realistic than any character in any previous Christian movie that has come out prior to this. And I know I said I don't believe this is a Christian movie, but even the satire moments. I mean, the worship leader who is this self-conscious like super artist who uses nothing but Jesus in his songs. Or the scene where they are like learning how to play the game and they're like learning how to pray.
Oh, yes.
And how should they pray before food? Can Christians cuss? I mean, it's a lengthy scene, but it's super, super funny.
And accurate. Like the scene
And
about
accurate!
the scene about, the prayers. It says, say the words Jesus, Christ, God, all these other things a lot. And just is a word that's like the kicker that you need to throw in a lot. You need the dramatic pauses. And then using those techniques in the next scene, you see Todd giving a prayer. And it sounds exactly like the type of prayer you'd expect to hear in a corporate worship setting.
Where there is satire in this film, for the most part, it is spot on, which only could come from a Christian studio self-critiquing, current Christian culture.
Because I can't see someone who is separate from the church knowing all of this.
Yeah, there are so many satirical moments in this film. I mean, this is a very intelligent film. This is not, by any stretch, a dumb movie, which whatever you take that to mean. The satire in this film is very intelligent, very precise, and it's very biting. And it's from little things like, praying whatever, to bigger picture things like the tour that they go on. Very much, and the fact that they start off in Atlanta, Georgia, was what led me onto this. It's very passion-y. Like the Passion Worship conferences. I'm pretty sure that's what they were satiring in mind because it starts off in Atlanta, Georgia, and kind of has a similar thing going through it as of late, where where Passion Worship conferences are touring around in various places. But it's satires on small points, it's satires on large points, it's satires on even the bigger picture, and it's not something that I don't think you could have done if you weren't a Christian. So for people like us who are Christians, we watch this movie and we're like, yeah, this is right. This is us. As awkward as we want to admit, this is us.
For sure, especially when they're talking about how, they start talking about Christian fashion and saying,
oh my gosh,
the hymnals, all the old speak, that kind of stuff, that's thrown out the window. Now Christians are basically hipsters who drink fair trade coffee. And I'm like nodding my head.
The scene where the worship guy like passes up on the coffee because it's not fair trade. It's just like,
well, I don't think he passed up on it because it was fair trade. It never like explicitly said that, but I'm willing to bet.
I'm willing to bet that's what it was.
I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many moments in this movie where the satire really in this film really deserves its own episode. Not that we're going to do another episode on this per se, but if you like satire and if you're willing to watch this movie and like have a mirror put up to your face and the faces of your friends and the faces of your church, then this is something that you're going to want to watch because it is funny, but it is very insightful into the present state of many, many things in the American church.
And one thing I just thought of, one thing is probably one of the most unique things in this movie. You look at the cast, and I'd say probably the most morally upstanding character was Tyler. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would say that Tyler was the most morally upstanding character, even though he was complicit in the whole thing.
Yeah, and he's not a Christian in the movie. He is not a Christian, and he's more moral than some of the Christians in the movie. And particularly, like, from the beginning, he's like, I don't want to do this, blah, blah. He feels really uncomfortable about it.
And then only when, like, they offer to, like, get him a benefit out of it, he like jumps on the train.
Yeah, and one scene in particular, I remember, it's when they're counting their money and they skim the bit off the top, and he's about to sign his name. There's
That
this,
was awesome.
yeah, and a lot of, I mean, I'm sure we've all seen papers like this where it's like, I signed that the above is completely true to the best of my knowledge, but he sees it in his head as, by signing this, I agree that all of this is made up and that I'm totally going to hell for this or something like that.
Yeah, it was a really really good twist on that scene. Tyler probably is the most morally upstanding character in the film because even the Christians in this movie, they may not be stealing money, but Callie should know better. I mean, she should know and should be able to call crap on these guys from the very get-go. Gabriel is a egomaniac, a self-seeking ego guy. Christopher McDonald's character Ken is how about opportunist?
Opportunist, yeah, that works.
Okay, he's an opportunist who totally tries to take advantage of the fact that Sam and his group has stolen this money to use it for his own purposes. There's not a character in this movie that is morally praiseworthy, really, in any way.
Not really, no, I wouldn't say so.
I mean, Callie is more of an innocent person, but she's so innocent to the point that she doesn't do the right thing and call crap when she should have.
Yeah, and I mean, I can definitely see that in some of today's church. Like, I mean, you can point out problems in this ministry or with this person, and there's always going to be that too innocent Christian who wants to believe that everyone who's up there saying the word Jesus is good. And I kind of got that vibe from Callie, if that makes any sense at all.
Well, yeah, because like the opening, like where they first meet, Sam first meets Callie, and like Sam hands her the brochure, whatever, and the brochure has like nothing. It's a terrible, terrible brochure.
Yeah, at first she's wanting to like have more explanation of the steps, and like the first thing shows the African baby and then money, and then it says step 1, give money. Then the next scene shows the African baby with sunglasses and raindrops, and it says step 2, we change lives.
Yeah, I mean, she should have called crap on it, but she doesn't. Which I appreciate the fact, and this sounds terrible, but I appreciate the fact that these guys don't necessarily portray us as being these perfect people, because we are not.
I love that they don't, because it puts unrealistic standards on Christians. Like if a non-Christian would somehow see some of the other movies we've been putting out, they'd be like, hey, why aren't you this perfect? This movie says you're supposed to be perfect.
Yeah,
you're not.
We have set ourselves up to be this standard where we are these perfect people that never have any problems. When really, because of the gospel, when we look at ourselves, we realize that there is nothing good that dwells in our flesh, that we are depraved beyond the point of doing anything to save ourselves, and we needed someone to come and save us because we are so screwed up, which the gospel that saves isn't anywhere in this movie. And as controversial as this might sound from my end, I think that's a good thing.
I would definitely agree, because with a lot of other faith-based movies, there's the standard plan people think is going to work, where someone's going to walk into this movie and then, they won't be expecting a gospel presentation. Then it'll come to like, oh, I see the light now. I'm going to become a Christian, which if that happens, great. But if that does happen, it's going to happen despite the plans, not because of it. But in this one, no gospel presentation at all. There's no trap that tries to lure non-Christians in to watch it. It's just a movie that involves Christians.
It gets close to that in the climax scene with Sam and Callie. It kind of gets close to that and flirts with it a little bit, but it doesn't go all the way.
And Callie even says that she's not expecting it to be a coming to Christ moment.
Yeah, she did say that. I didn't even catch that, but she did say that. I appreciate the fact that the filmmakers, in their freedom, decided to not include the gospel because they didn't feel compelled or like forced that they had to include the gospel. And then 2, it's okay that a movie about Christians in this kind of manner was made that didn't show the bad guys becoming good guys in the end. That's entirely up to the artist to decide how he wants his story to end. And that's totally okay. And I commend these. If I were to commend them for anything, I would commend them for realizing the freedom to end this movie the way they did.
Granted, one thing that I am glad they did, like there can be a bit too much of an extreme on that end, but they did have it to where the bad guys did see consequences for their actions. Like they definitely painted these bad actions as something that is bad and needs to be punished.
Okay, they did do that, but that's far from having, I saw the light conversion moment
Definitely.
with the gospel. So down the road, and where do we go from here? I don't know the impact that this movie is going to have. I hope that it becomes a movie that really makes its way through the Christian circles, because that's I think that's one of the main audiences that it's intended to. I hope that this movie, with despite its imperfections and despite its flaws, with the boldness and the innovation that they take for this movie, inspires other filmmakers to explore other areas where they too can be daring, bold, provocative, and controversial. This movie, I think, really broadened the horizon on that end, and it really throws a wrench into what we can, as Christians, what we should be looking for in a Christian film. Which, to say again, I don't necessarily think that this is a Christian movie in the strictest sense, but I don't see a reason why we couldn't see other movies like this down the road that you could call Christian films, that are the same quality, good acting, good, innovative, provocative, gripping storyline that falls into that category.
And one thing that I do think is kind of sad about this whole thing, I mean, granted, it's a good movie and it's gotten a decent amount of publicity. Great. But there are other movies similar to this that have happened. One in particular that comes to mind is The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which didn't exactly have a gospel presentation, but it was made by a Christian writer and director who did it for the purposes of promoting the Christian worldview.
Yeah, I mean, yes, the gospel is the message that we are to take to the world, but it's not as if that is the only thing that we are capable of talking about or writing about or making movies about or addressing. And so, in closing, because we're getting a little bit too late on time here, in closing, believe me, funny movie, well written, good acting, kind of weak in a couple places because of the script, a little bit too satirical in a couple of places, but overall, this was a very, very funny movie that I will definitely be watching again. And I mean, I think you would agree with me on that this was well worth our time, well worth talking about.
Definitely. And it was actually even better than I had hoped it was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, this movie definitely didn't disappoint. I had a lot of hype for this movie beforehand. Definitely didn't disappoint. I hope that this movie gains a lot of success, because I think it deserves quite a bit of success, even though it's going to cause some problems. I think if it were to gain more publicity in the conscious Christian circle right now, that it would cause some controversy. But I think that the controversy generated by this movie will be worth it. I think it will be very much worth it and something that we need.
Yeah, it would at least get us talking about things that we definitely need to be talking about.
Yeah, so all that to say, go watch the movie. Believe me, you need to see Believe Me.
Wow.
That's the title of the episode right there. All right, well, we're at a minute and 5. We're at an hour and 5, so let's go ahead and start wrapping this up. Brett, you got any recommendations this week?
Yes. As of now, I actually have 3 short recommendations, all of them video games. As of now, the 3DS demo of Super Smash Bros. Is out. You can download it for free on your 3DS and play it. You can play as Mega Man, Pikachu, or the Animal Crossing villager.
My toads can't wait to play as Mega Man.
Yeah, it's great. I would definitely recommend it. And there are actually 2 cell phone games I recently discovered. One, Five Nights at Freddy's. Very simplistic but very scary game. You can download a free demo or purchase the full version for like $3 on both Android and iPhone. And I very recently discovered a game called Dragon Pet, which is basically a Tamagotchi-style pet game where you raise a pet dragon.
I had a Tamagotchi-style thing, but when I was a kid, only it was for R2-D2.
Huh, interesting. But
it was pretty cool. I liked it.
Yeah, Dragon Pet is definitely awesome. I love my dragon, Sovngarde.
Sovngarde?
It's the name of the Norse Nord heaven in Elder Scrolls.
Oh, okay, I gotcha. The only recommendation that I have this week of things you ought to check out is Believe Me. How about that? I'm going to be a total cheapskate and subjugate my reco to what we've already been talking about this whole time.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I'm cheap like that. Yeah, so, oh my gosh, I can't wait to get this episode over with. Yeah, so many problems with this episode. Our game was off the whole entire time.
Yeah.
But Brett, despite the fact that our game was off for most of this episode, thanks for sticking in and helping me get this done.
No problem.
And I would also like to thank. I don't have any thanks for either Apple, Behringer, or DigiDesign, only because I can't figure out which one was the source of my audio problem. So they don't get any thanks from me this week. I will definitely say a thanks for Valve and Steam for putting the Valve Complete Pack at 75% off in the Steam store.
Testify.
What?
Just testify. That was a good deal.
Okay.
Yeah, it was weird, but
I don't get it. But
like testify. Yeah, testify about Valve. I'm agreeing with you.
Okay. I don't even know. Yeah, I've been playing Counter-Strike Global Offensive and definitely been digging that, so thanks for that. All right, Brett, let's go ahead and close this episode out. Even though I said earlier in the episode that I thought it was a good thing that Believe Me necessarily didn't have a gospel presentation in it, I do want to take time to praise God for the glorious gospel of Jesus Christ, where as Jesus was hanging on the tree, on the cross, and the Father was pouring out his wrath for the sins of those who would believe in him, he said at the end that it was finished, and that our sins have been paid for, our sins have been atoned for, and that we are free in the regard of making up for our sins or having to perform to earn our righteousness. Jesus is our perfect righteousness, and that message that we believe means that we rest in the fact that we don't have to do anything to earn that righteousness. That righteousness is ours. That justification is ours. That status before God is ours, which profoundly changes our whole entire lives and changes everything we do, including the way we look at music, the way we look at movies, the way we look at how we interact with culture, is all rooted in the gospel. It is the message that we proclaim. It is the message we are called to defend. And I mean, we wouldn't be here doing this if it weren't for the gospel. That's really the biggest motivation for why we're doing this, as crazy as it sounds, is for the gospel of Jesus Christ, the greatest truth and the greatest possession that we have. So, all that to say is that I'm Austin.
And I'm Brett.
And now I got to edit this thing, and now I got to piecemeal it all together where all the parts where we had to stop and start recording.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, easy. Yeah, easy for you to say. You're not the one who has to do it. Yeah. It's all right. I mean, this is what I like to do. I had fun with this episode. I'm just glad it's over. I don't know what we're going to talk about next week, but if you have any suggestions, you feel free to email us at anotherscendinglark@gmail.com and get in touch with us like I mentioned earlier in this show. I hope you all have a great week. I hope you all go and rent or buy Believe Me and watch it with your family and with your friends. And yeah, it's a good movie. If you haven't seen it, see it, and see it soon. Y'all have a good week.